As a pediatrician, I talk to parents about how to keep their kids healthy. And what do I tell parents all the time? Your health matters too. When parents feel better in their bodies, they have more energy and are more able to take care of their families. If weight loss is one of your 2026 goals and you're ready to make real progress, Weight Loss by Hers may be a good option to explore. What I appreciate about Hers is that it's science-based, personalized care. Through Hers, you connect with a licensed medical provider who looks at your full picture and determines if treatment is right for you. Your plan may include options like oral medications or GLP-1 injectables, along with support, nutrition guidance, and tools to track things like sleep, movement, and hydration. For busy parents especially, I like that Hers offers 100% online care with real providers, no hidden membership fees, and options that fit your real life. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's part of taking care of your family. Feel like your best self again. Visit forhers.com/Dr. Wendy to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's forhers.com/DRWENDY. forhers.com/Dr. Wendy. Weight Loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded drug products are not approved or evaluated for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for full details, important safety information, and restrictions. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased. A few years ago, I read about this product called laundry sauce, and I got it for my mother and myself as a holiday gift. And I have to tell you, it changed how I feel about laundry. Laundry sauce is a premium collection of high-performance detergent pods and laundry essentials, infused with bold, sophisticated fragrances crafted by top perfumers. The pre-measured pods make my life easier. No more wrestling with those giant detergent bottles or dripping blue liquid down the side of the washer. You know what I mean. And I smell amazing. I love drinking Earl Grey tea, so it makes sense that I'm obsessed with their Italian bergamot scent. It's modern, bright, citrusy with notes of sweet mandarin, sandalwood, Indonesian patchouli. It smells incredible. And if that's not really your vibe, there are options like Australian sandalwood or Himalayan cashmere. If you subscribe to the signature package, they deliver detergent pods, scent boosters, dryer sheets, and more right to your door so you never run out mid-wash again. And maybe the best part, they offer a full money-back guarantee. If your laundry doesn't smell cleaner and better, you get a full refund, no questions asked. For a limited time only, our listeners get 20% off your entire order when you use code Dr. Wendy at laundrysauce.com. That's 20% off at laundrysauce.com with promo code DRWENDY. After you check out, they'll ask where you heard about them, so don't forget to drop our name. Trust us, your laundry's never smelled this good. Hey, it's Dr. Wendy, and I am really glad you're here because this episode is for you. Because listen, have you ever said this? Our family just needs to get healthier. This year, we are going to get healthy. Okay, so yes, but do any of us even know what healthy is when it comes to what to eat right now? If you pay attention to the news or social media trends, it's so confusing. Like, what is the story with beef tallow? What even is beef tallow? I've got a guest today, and she created a brand new program for health coaching for families. And she's going to help us sort all of this out and figure out what we can learn from this crazy new food pyramid. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the pediatrician next door. I'm that doctor friend you call for practical advice about your kids' health. I mix the science of medicine with the reality of parenting. I just got home from a medical conference at the Culinary Institute. It was amazing, as you can imagine. The food was ridiculous. So the hot topic, of course, for the dietitian and doctor nerds at the conference is that the brand new 2025 to 2030 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, or as everyone at the conference calls it, the DGAs, they were just released. And with it, a reimagined food pyramid. This new food pyramid has sparked a lot of conversations and some controversy. If you've looked at it, you might have some questions too. I made a list. So first, why is there a giant picture of a steak at the top? And what about kids? Are these new guidelines going to influence school meals and what we teach kids about food? Because they're not going to eat a giant steak or a piece of salmon at school. So I've got a respected colleague of mine here, Dr. Natalie Muth. She has like a lot of letters after her name. She's an MD, she has an MBA, and she's a registered dietitian. Dr. Muth is the CEO and co-founder of Namio Health. an online healthy lifestyle program for families. And we're going to get to that. But first, I want to know what the deal is with this upside down triangle of food. Here's Dr. Muth.
Every 5 years, there's updated dietary guidelines that get released. So this is the 2025 to 2030 version of these updated dietary guidelines. And to be honest, really what they're used for is guiding federal nutrition policy and programs. So things like school lunch, things like WIC program, they have to be kind of in compliance with the dietary guidelines. Outside of those programs, usually what the dietary guidelines do is tell us, based on the best science, of what is the healthiest way to eat to prevent chronic disease and to really optimize our overall health and well-being. There's a little bit more kind of discussion around that this time around because some of the recommendations aren't necessarily what is supported by the best science currently, but some of them are. So it's a little bit confusing almost because some things you can really get behind and are definitely takeaways that we want to talk about and that families can use right away. And some of the other things, there's a lot of noise out there about them and a lot of talk about them, but they might be best kind of ignored, really, in my opinion.
That is the same thought that a giant room of chefs, dietitians, PhD scientists, and doctors thought at the conference that I just attended. And some of those people were MDs and chefs. So cool. So before we figure out what we can take away from the new guidelines, it's important to understand the background here. I was confused because although I admittedly ignore the guidelines and have for decades, my son is a Boy Scout and they follow the guidelines. But it was a picture of a round plate last time I checked. You know, when Scouts cook for each other, you may not know this, their guidebook says they have to follow the My Plate, but now it's a pyramid again. What's going on?
Previously, the recommendations were a picture of what's called a My Plate. So it was kind of a way to translate how to eat into what you might have at a mealtime. So the My Plate, which is no longer what's being promoted, but My Plate had that a quarter of your plate was proteins, a quarter of it was grains, and about half your plate being vegetables and fruits. That was guidance based on pretty good science for the most part of what healthy eating looks like. And I should say that not a lot of people actually eat in the way of the dietary guidelines historically anyway. So, it's out there as a recommendation. These new dietary guidelines kind of flipped a lot of that around, and it also went way retro to a food pyramid, which this was way back that there used to be, the recommendation was this pyramid, and it kind of was retired because it wasn't really very easy to translate into how to eat. But these new dietary guidelines come back with a pyramid, but they flipped it on its head. And I guess a lot of what they included and where they included it is also flipped around a bit. Even if you, I just need to say, if you actually read deeper into the dietary guidelines that were published, it's not exactly consistent with what is shown in this upside down pyramid. I wish we could just ignore this pyramid.
Where did this come from and how does it get made, you ask? Every 5 years, the federal government appoints a panel of experts to create the dietary guidelines for Americans. This advisory committee, which was appointed 5 years ago, includes scientists, physicians, dietitians, and public health researchers, all who study nutrition and disease. They spend years reading thousands of research studies to understand how food affects our health. I met one of them recently. It was Christopher Gardner from Stanford, if you're curious, if you're into this stuff. He's super awesome. And these experts break into groups to focus on very specific questions, and then they do a deep dive on their question. They start with one question, for example, how much protein should we eat? Seems like a simple question, but that question leads to 35 other sub-questions, and they get all into the weeds on each one. Then they put it all together for us. Oh, and this is volunteer time. They don't get paid. So the committee writes a very detailed report. The current one is 421 pages long, and then federal agencies use it to develop an outline for overall eating patterns. The guidelines are designed for the entire population, and they help shape school lunches, hospital meals, and military food programs. They're not meant to be personalized advice, but still, we can learn a lot from this committee's hard work. So we have the new food pyramid, which is a picture. Maybe you've seen it. And then separately, there is a biblic-sized report that goes with it. The pyramid, if you haven't seen it yet, shows a rotisserie chicken at the top, a tray of meat goo, or maybe it's a lasagna. I really can't tell. Look, tell me what you think it is. And then a slab of steak, literally flexing at the top. Vegetables and fruits are still there, don't worry. Whole grains are invited to the pyramid, but they're definitely not center stage. And then ultra-processed foods are told to see themselves out. As an aside, I have to share this. Costco rotisserie chicken, which I assume is what is pictured at the top of the pyramid, is injected with sodium phosphate and carrageenan. These aren't there for nutrition. They're what we call cosmetic additives. They help the chicken look pretty, stay juicy, and last longer. The problem is that additives like carrageenan, which is a food thickener, among other cosmetic additives like artificial sweeteners, preservatives, food dyes, these cause gut irritation and inflammation, and they disrupt the healthy bacteria in our intestines and may increase what's called intestinal permeability. Basically, that makes the gut lining more leaky than it should be. So you can't trust a rotisserie chicken either. That's not necessarily healthy. That doesn't mean one chicken is dangerous, but it's a reminder that even foods that look simple, like this one on the pyramid, can contain ingredients that are designed for appearance and shelf life and not for our health. And that's what is pictured at the top of this pyramid. I'm just saying, anyway, I got off topic. So meat, dairy, cheese, and a slice of salmon are center stage on the pyramid. But this is very misleading in terms of what the written guidelines say. So don't trust the picture. Dr. Muth can take us deeper on this.
If you read deeper into the guidelines, it also talks about plant-based proteins, and generally plant-based proteins, nuts, beans, seeds, legumes, things like that, generally tend to be a little bit healthier because they have less saturated fats, they have more fiber, and they also have a fair amount of protein in them too. A big question and a big concern that has been raised is that this pyramid shows these high saturated fat protein like steak and then butter, and recommending like beef tallow, things like that are really high in saturated fats. But the actual guidelines say, as they always have said, that we should have less than 10% of total calories from saturated fats. And you can't really be eating with these things like in the widest part of the pyramid where they're making up like a big part of your diet and still meet that less than 10% recommendation. That's just like one example of how the picture isn't exactly what's in the written part of the guidelines. And if you really wanted to look at the science, this is a little bit of nuance, but it's important to me as like a nutrition person. There actually is like a very robust report that's written based on the science that was published last year or 2024, that every time this gets updated, there has to be a scientific advisory report. And there was a scientific advisory report that was put together that's supposed to guide these new dietary guidelines. But that was kind of like thrown out. And then a different report that's a little bit biased was used to like create this pyramid. So if you go back to the science that was there in that original report, it's not totally consistent with some of these messages that you see in the pyramid that was put out or even in the documents of the dietary guidelines.
I fact-checked this one and she's right, but it's more complicated. And I've got the inside dirt on this, so message me if you want to hear the details. There's more to the story. Anyway, back to the story.
A key message of the guidelines that's really important that I can get behind 100% is to eat more real food. So trying to have less of these ultra-processed foods, these things with all kinds of different additives, long ingredient lists, can't say the words, like who knows what's even in there. Moving away from that to eating more real foods, you know where they came from. That's fantastic. And eating lots of fruits and vegetables is emphasized as well in these dietary guidelines. Also fantastic. A lot of foods right now that are in some of the programs like school lunch or even daycares, they may be either more processed than would be ideal most of the time, much of the time. And maybe there's not as many like whole fruits and vegetables available. So if the implementation is that kids are getting more access to more real foods and hopefully, getting access to vegetables and fruits that taste good and that they can be interested in eating, then that's great. If they start getting like butter loaded up on everything and like beef tallow in their lunch, like, okay, those things would be less good. So I think the implementation and the cost, like there's so many different factors that go into play when you're looking at these public health programs. I don't know exactly how it's going to look, other than one thing, which they already are starting to do, and that is the dairy issue and the milk offerings. Because another key part of these new dietary guidelines, it emphasizes full-fat dairy products and having more full-fat dairy products. And they're already changing school lunch and daycares and things they're starting to have it be that full-fat version is offered, at least alongside what the non-fat and low-fat versions.
The dairy fat issue is a little murky still. There is some indication that the saturated fat in dairy does act differently in our body than the saturated fat in meat, but there aren't enough studies to say that for sure.
It does seem to be that there's probably beneficial things in the dairy product that helps to be able to process that saturated fat a little bit differently than if you're having like saturated fat from red meat, let's say.
The bottom line on this one, though, is that it probably doesn't matter whether you eat and drink full fat or low fat dairy, as long as your diet has a ton of fruits, veggies, nuts, and whole grains. If you like full fat dairy, enjoy your latte. We have to enjoy our food. At the conference I went to, we had to play this really fun game, which I totally recommend for your school group or scout troop. The company Canola had a booth and they set out a bunch of different fats on their table and they asked us to line them up in order of their saturated fat content. See if you can get it. They had coconut oil, beef tallow, olive oil, corn oil, lard, canola oil, and sunflower oil. I didn't even come close to lining them up correctly. I was shocked. So that leads me to the next question. In real life, how do you know what has saturated fat and what doesn't?
Generally, a saturated fat is something that's going to be a solid at room temperature, so think like butter. An unsaturated fat is generally going to be a liquid at room temperature, think like olive oil. There's some variation with that, but even if you're looking at different types of oils, the ones that are more saturated, like a coconut oil, is going to be a lot more solid or semi-solid compared to a high unsaturated fat. A good amount of research over time has shown that generally eating unsaturated fats can provide, especially like omega-3 unsaturated fats, can provide lots of heart health benefits, and they can be really good for you. So think fatty fish you may hear about is like salmon, tuna as being very healthy for you. Certain like nuts and seeds, very healthy for you because they're higher in like omega-3 unsaturated fats. Whereas saturated fats in the body can they can contribute to blockage of the arteries and they can contribute to heart disease. So it's long been said to really try to minimize saturated fat intake or replace saturated fats with more unsaturated fats. I mean, if you want to be science-based, and it's like eating more fish, fatty fish, is good for your heart and good for your health. It's kind of like eating in a Mediterranean style way, which a lot of studies have shown is very beneficial. So doing more, I mean, I've always said, which is a little different than what these dietary guidelines would say, but like trying to get more fish like twice a week if you can, and trying to like minimize the red meat to once or twice a week if you can is great for your health. It's not exactly what these new dietary guidelines say. They kind of encourage you to eat more red meat, but really, I don't recommend it.
And on that note, I'm going to take a quick break and we'll come back to talk about meal timing, how to get your grains, and some other fun controversies. I always tell parents to read the label before drinking anything packaged. Yeah, that advice is not just for food. Drinks count too, and a lot of them are surprisingly high in added sugar. That's why Cure is one I feel good recommending. Cure's hydration packs are clean and simple. Plant-based electrolytes, no added sugar, and only 25 calories. They come in refreshing flavors like watermelon, berry pomegranate, and lemonade that don't taste artificial. What makes Cure different is the science. It uses the same electrolyte ratio proven to hydrate as effectively as an IV drip, which means your body can absorb and use what you're drinking. For kids, Cure Kids Mixes are made with the help of pediatricians. No artificial ingredients, no added sugars, and kid-approved flavors. Whether it's after sports, long school days, or winter play, kids lose electrolytes too, even when it's cold outside. Staying hydrated isn't just about water. You also need electrolytes. That's why I recommend Cure. It's clean, tastes great, and my patients love it. You can grab Cure on Amazon or find a store near you at curehydration.com/Dr. Wendy. That's DrWendy. Real ingredients, real hydration, ready for the whole family. I have something fascinating to share. You know how everyone always talks about the Mediterranean diet being so healthy? Well, if you haven't heard that, just trust me, people say it all the time. Here's the part that surprised me. We hold the Mediterranean diet up on a pedestal because that's the one everyone has studied. But the African diet and the Indian diet and lots of other diets are as healthy. What we should say when we recommend a Mediterranean diet is that we are recommending a traditional, minimally processed, plant-forward plate with healthy fats. And that can be found with Japanese food, African food. I mean, only eating lamb, feta cheese, and wine is technically a Mediterranean diet, but that's not what we mean. Healthy eating doesn't belong to one region of the world. What else do these traditional healthy diets have in common? They have a lot of whole grains, many of which you might not be familiar with. Like, have you tried teff or fonio? A healthy diet, one that enhances your happy gut, is filled with these. Where are they in the new food pyramid?
It's part of what's confusing about this new pyramid that we have, because for some reason, it includes at the very tip at the bottom, says whole grains, which is like you should avoid them, like you shouldn't have whole grains. But whole grains are good. And even if you read the Dietary Guidelines, it encourages you to eat whole grains. It's the refined grain and those ultra-processed carbohydrates that don't have fiber, that don't have a lot of the nutrients that can be beneficial from whole grains. Those are the ones that you want to minimize and try to not have very often, or to at least have less than we are right now.
Fiber isn't just about preventing constipation. Fiber feeds your gut bacteria. When you eat fiber, it goes to your colon where your gut microbes ferment it. And that fermentation process makes short-chain fatty acids. You don't need to know that, but those help lower inflammation. They strengthen the lining of your gut, and they do support your immune system. The fiber sources we need come from a plant: beans, lentils, oats, brown rice, quinoa. So what are some easy swaps you can make? Replace your rice with quick-cooking, protein-packed quinoa or farro. Do you think all the pastas are the same? They're not. The best way to tell is by reading the label on the package. Sometimes a product says multigrain or made with whole grains, but it only has like 1 gram of fiber. If we really want to support gut health, we have to start flipping the package over and looking at the fiber line. There are white pastas that are fiber-rich. I'm just saying.
Reading nutrition labels can be a little overwhelming at first when you're first looking at it if you haven't been used to doing it, but there's a lot of really helpful information on the nutrition label. So if you're looking at it, I mean, one is to look and see like what's the serving size. That's the first step in looking at it, because everything else on that label is based off of 1 serving of whatever that food is. And it will tell you at the top like what the serving size is. And then look at things like the saturated fat, we talked a lot about a little bit. Added sugars is a huge one. Like, look there. Those are things you want to, saturated fat, added sugar, sodium, you want to try to be on the lower end if you can. Whereas you want to have a lot of fiber. So looking there and seeing if the food has fiber, especially if you're getting a grain. And then the ingredient list can be very helpful, because if you just see like a super long ingredient list of words that you don't know how to say and like you're not sure what that exactly is, that's telling you it's an ultra-processed food. So you'd be better off trying to minimize that at least, or choosing something else that has an ingredient list that's very short, or it has words that you know the food that it corresponds to.
All right, are you ready for my hot tip on this one? This is where you want to look for those cosmetic ingredients I was talking about. These are substances that are added to your food to make them look pretty, feel better in your mouth, and last longer on the shelf. There are some great packaged, even highly processed foods out there that are just fine because they don't have these ingredients. So here's my tip. Do an internet search for inflammatory food additives and don't buy packaged foods that have those ingredients. These are not the same as all the crazy people telling you that cashews cause inflammation or tomatoes do or whatever. I mean, technically, if you are allergic to cashews, they do cause inflammation, but there is a lot of misinformation out there about inflammation. So this is the list you have to avoid, those cosmetic food additives. So that led me to think about this other thing I hear about all the time, and that's meal timing. Have you heard about this? Does it matter when you eat?
When you're talking about meal timing, what you want to be thinking about is having regular, planned, scheduled meals for the family, like trying to have consistent timing for like a breakfast, lunch, dinner, that routine and structure. Kids do really well with that. And it also helps you set the schedule and the stage for them to be more likely to eat in that balanced plate way or eating a balanced meal, because meal times tend to be healthier than snacking. And so you also want to try to minimize snacks or have scheduled snack times so that kids are hungry at mealtime. So like an hour or two before that mealtime, and the snacks being like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, rather than these refined things in crinkly bags that, they're snacking on throughout the day. So when you're talking about mealtime, to me, it's having a schedule can actually be quite beneficial. Another thing that does come up a lot and can be a concern is a lot of studies have shown that kids tend to get most of the food and calories in the day that they eat, like in those hours from when they get home from school to when they go to bed, and just eating, not just the meal, but like snacking a lot and eating a lot. And so some studies that have shown benefit to timing of like not eating after a certain time of day can be helpful, but that's mostly just in the fact that it's taking out some of that extra snacking and like mindless eating.
These are the kinds of things that Dr. Muth's lifestyle program helps with. I asked her what's the easiest thing a family could start working on right now to make some changes, and I loved this answer. It's not at all what I expected.
Every family might have a different easiest thing for them. And that's part of what we help with at NAMIO too, but just thinking about, because one thing that it might really be easy and doable for a family to have one time a week to eat together. If you're eating not together at all right now, trying to have, Sunday evening or whatever, it can be a breakfast or a lunch, like whatever works, of trying to have it just be one time that you're eating together. But that might not be the easiest thing for another family. Another family, the easiest thing might be to put a fruit bowl on the counter. Don't even worry about anything else, just having the fruit or vegetables like very accessible for kids and out there when they're hungry, that they'll be more likely to grab it because that's what they're seeing. That could be a way of getting a child who has very few vegetables or fruits in their day right now to having something, which could be great. For another family, the easiest thing might be stop buying certain processed foods or buying less of them. Instead of buying 3 different snacky things that are processed food or 3 different types of dessert for the week, when you go grocery shopping, if you go weekly, buy one and have it last the whole week. And when it's gone, it's gone. And gradually kind of coming off of some of that really ultra processed foods. For another family, it might be adding breakfast. There's different small steps that can be really impactful for families. But I'd say one thing, I'm with you, like this can be overwhelming trying to do all of it at once, and it won't work. Like take one small thing. If it can be having more vegetables and fruits, having less ultra processed foods, eating together, one thing, and building on that can make a really huge difference.
Our families aren't all the same. Yeah, we do all have in common that we want to be healthy. That's true. But that's different for every one of us. And I really appreciated that Dr. Muth's approach is so practical. One other challenge, I think, is there's a lot of confusion about what is the right thing to do for our family and what we should eat. It's not beef tallow, I'm pretty sure. And Dr. Muth knows this too. What resources are out there for families?
So families that are looking for resources, I would like to share that at NAMIO Health, we exist to help support families with resources and being able to take those small steps to help their families to be healthier. And so we right now have, being that it's a new year and lots of people are trying to make those small steps to make a big positive impact for their family this year, we have a 7-day Kickstarter resource free on our website, NAMIO Health, that families can download and just like help you to get started. So it's taking some of these small steps that we're talking about and helping you to operationalize or make it happen in your family and kind of build from there. So I would really recommend check us out at NAMIO Health. We also have our Instagram page and some webinars and our LinkedIn to really make this doable for families. It's really designed with hands-on. There's weekly coaching sessions, one-on-one and group sessions, as well as a curriculum that you get each week to help support you in really having all the tools and resources that you need to help your family be active, eat well, get great sleep, and have that strong social connection together.
And connection is one of the best things we can do for our health. If this episode helped clarify the confusion around the food pyramid, fiber, or carbohydrates, share it with a friend, especially that friend that has a shelf full of supplements and packs tinned fish in their kids' lunch. If you want practical, science-based guidance on feeding your family well, check out Namio Health. I'll put the link for the 7-day Family Health Kickstart in the show notes so you can explore their resources and tools. For more from the Pediatrician Next Door, find me on the web at pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com. If you've got a question about the weird things kids do, send an email to hello@pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com for a chance to hear your voice on the show. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the Pediatrician Next Door. This show is produced by Red Rock Music. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever it is you're listening. I'll be back next time with more. It's true. I am really drinking Cure right now.